It's November 14th, 1940. Coventry rests beneath a dark, moonless night. At precisely 7:20 p.m., the initial Heinkel 111 reaches the English coastline. Its Nicobine radio navigation system directs it precisely toward the heart of the city. During the following 11 hours, 449 Luftwaffe aircraft will release 500 tons of high explosives, along with 30,000 incendiary devices. When morning comes, the ancient cathedral stands as nothing more than a stone framework. 568 citizens have perished, and 2/3 of the city's structures are either destroyed or burning. RAF Fighter Command achieves exactly 0 successful interceptions during that night, not a single one. This wasn't unusual, this was standard. From September 1940 through May 1941, the Blitz claimed more than 43,000 British lives and wounded another 139,000. Every night, German aircraft crossed the Channel, hit their objectives, and flew back safely. Meanwhile, RAF Spitfires and Hurricanes, those famous champions of daylight combat during the Battle of Britain, remained completely ineffective on the airfields. These planes were designed for daylight aerial combat, where a pilot relied mainly on his eyesight. However, at 15,000 feet on a pitch-black night, human eyesight becomes worthless. An enemy bomber could fly past just 200 yards away and stay totally invisible. The RAF attempted every possible solution. They placed single-engine aircraft in patrol zones along known flight paths, hoping for fortunate visual encounters. Their success rate stayed below 1%. They experimented with cat's eye operations, where aviators supposedly gifted with exceptional night vision would wait near searchlight installations, expecting ground teams to spotlight an enemy. During an ideal night featuring a bright moon and clear conditions, a capable pilot might catch a bomber outlined against the clouds. Possibly. Flight Lieutenant Guy Gibson, who'd eventually command the Dam Busters mission, completed 99 nighttime flights in early 1941 and achieved precisely 1 confirmed destruction. The numbers told a harsh story. A Heinkel bomber spans approximately 57 feet wing to wing. During darkness, the typical fighter pilot couldn't detect it past 400 feet. However, to patrol 1 cubic mile of sky traveling at 250 miles per hour, an aviator needed to scan 147 billion cubic feet, while the enemy bomber occupied merely 50,000 cubic feet of that space at any moment. It resembled searching for one particular needle in a haystack as large as Westminster while wearing a blindfold and running. Ground stations attempted to assist. They monitored approaching formations on their chain-home radar installations and transmitted coordinates to fighters already airborne. Banded at Angels 15, bearing 270. The fighter would rush to that location, but radar technicians on the ground could only refresh positions every several minutes, and their precision varied by as much as 2 miles. When a fighter arrived at the spot, the bomber had already relocated. The station would transmit a revised heading. The fighter would bank. The bomber would adjust course. This lethal game of sightless Marco Polo continued until either the fighter exhausted its fuel or the bomber completed its attack and withdrew. Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding observed his country burning. His fighters had defended Britain during daylight hours, but nightfall made them powerless. Manufacturing centers, Birmingham, Liverpool, Manchester, Glasgow, faced systematic demolition. Industrial output was being strangled, public resolve was weakening, and the Luftwaffe lost fewer aircraft monthly to night defenders than to training mishaps. Change was essential. The RAF required vision capable of penetrating darkness. They required airborne radar systems. They required it to function properly. And they required it immediately. Chain home was impressive, yet entirely insufficient. By 1940, Britain's coastal radar network represented the world's most advanced early detection system. Those 350-foot steel masts could identify approaching bomber groups at 120 miles, providing fighter command critical time to launch interceptors and prepare defenses. The network had proven essential during the daylight battle of Britain, but spotting a bomber and destroying it are completely different challenges. Here's what ground-directed interception actually involved in practice. A chain home facility registers a formation breaching the coastline. The technician reports it to fighter headquarters. Hostile formation, 40-plus aircraft, Angels 12, Vector 285, velocity 180 knots. A director steers the closest night fighter toward the engagement. Steer 310, ascend to Angels 14. The aviator confirms and turns. 4 minutes elapse. The ground radar refreshes. The bomber group has altered direction slightly and gained altitude. Fresh coordinates transmitted. The fighter compensates. Another 3 minutes. Another refresh. The bombers have divided into smaller clusters. Now the mathematics become even worse. Chain home's radar precision was roughly 2 miles horizontally and 1,000 feet vertically. That creates a search area of approximately 13 million cubic feet. Within that margin of error, several bombers might be maneuvering separately. The ground director selects one radar return and continues guiding the fighter toward it. "You should be extremely close at this point," he announces. The aviator peers into blackness and observes nothing. He's likely within 2 miles of an enemy bomber, perhaps even the correct bomber, but 2 miles of dark sky represents an endless emptiness. Certain directors developed an almost mystical ability. Squadron leader John Cunningham's usual director, Flying Officer Jimmy Rawnsley, could interpret the cathode ray display like someone reading fortunes and tea leaves, predicting bomber actions and positioning Cunningham within visual distance through sheer instinct. Yet even Rawnsley's success ratio before mid-1941 remained around 5%. 5%. For every successful engagement, 19 bombers got away. The difficulties multiplied. Chain home was engineered to monitor outward across the channel, not follow aircraft already above Britain. After bombers moved inland, tracking became unreliable. Chain home's radar transmissions were calibrated for distance, not accurate positioning, and the system was entirely ineffective below 1,000 feet. Luftwaffe aircraft sometimes took advantage of this by descending after crossing the shoreline, vanishing from British radar completely until they climbed to attack altitude above their objective. Ground reflection complicated matters further. Radar signals reflected off terrain, structures, and even atmospheric conditions, generating spurious contacts that directors had to mentally screen out. During stormy nights with dense cloud cover, a single chain home installation might display 200 phantom targets. Technicians mastered distinguishing actual bombers from interference, but it demanded draining focus that required constant attention. Errors were unavoidable. Then came the human element. A ground director sat underground, observing a glowing green monitor, attempting to construct a three-dimensional mental model of combat occurring 15,000 feet overhead and 50 miles distant. The fighter aviator sat in a confined cockpit, managing instruments, power, and controls, while forcing his vision into darkness and hearing a static-filled radio voice issue continuous bearing adjustments. Turn starboard 10 degrees, steady. Target now 11 o'clock. 3 miles, slightly elevated. 3 miles, still unseen. The pilot's neck hurts from searching. His vision blurs from concentration. His fuel level decreases. And somewhere in the blackness, a Heinkel crew is aligning their bomb sights on a manufacturing plant. Britain required the radar within the fighter, right behind the aviator's viewpoint, illuminating the airspace ahead. They required the equipment compact enough to install in an aircraft and capable enough to provide advanced notice before visual contact. They required something that appeared impossible in 1939. Edward Bowen didn't appear like someone poised to revolutionize aerial combat forever. The 27-year-old scientist labored at the classified Bawdsey Manor Research Facility on the Suffolk coast, where Britain's radar development originated. In 1936, Robert Watson Watt had demonstrated radar could identify aircraft. By 1939, Bowen had received an impossible task: reduce a radar installation the size of a building into something capable of flight. The initial AI Mark I test, AI represented airborne interception, seemed absurd by any logical measure. The transmitter assembly weighed 220 pounds. The receiver components added another 180 pounds. The cathode ray displays for the operator required 90 more pounds. Power supplies, cabling, antenna arrays, the complete installation exceeded 600 pounds. Then there was the antenna configuration. Early AI radar operated on 1.5-meter wavelength, requiring antenna elements roughly 3 feet in length. These needed to be mounted externally on the aircraft's nose and wings, creating enormous drag. The Bristol Blenheim fighters selected for the initial trials looked like they'd flown through a hardware store. Arrow-shaped antennas jutted from their noses. Additional arrays protruded from both wings. The aerodynamic penalty reduced top velocity by nearly 30 miles per hour and made the aircraft handle like a garbage truck. But the worst aspect wasn't the mass or the drag, it was the performance, or absence of performance. AI Mark I's maximum detection distance was advertised as 5 miles. In reality, under optimal circumstances with a large bomber target, it might register a contact at 3 miles. More commonly, 2 miles, sometimes less. The minimum distance was 400 feet, meaning if you somehow managed to guide yourself within 400 feet of a target, your radar screen went blank due to range limitations. You possessed a 400-foot to 2-mile engagement window in 3-dimensional space at nighttime, while both aircraft were traveling over 200 miles per hour. And that assumed the equipment functioned. It frequently didn't. The vacuum tubes in early AI radar were fragile. Combat vibration shattered them. Temperature fluctuations caused them to fail. Moisture infiltrated the electronics. On a typical operational flight, the AI radar would operate for perhaps 20 minutes before something malfunctioned. The operator would spend the remaining mission attempting repairs in a freezing, unpressurized aircraft while wearing bulky gloves. Flight crews despised it. Squadron commanders wanted to discard it. Air Ministry officials questioned whether the entire initiative was throwing away money. Yet Edward Bowen and his team at the Telecommunications Research Establishment persisted with improvements. They couldn't make the apparatus smaller yet. The physics wouldn't permit it, but they could enhance reliability. They reinforced the vacuum tubes. They improved the sealing against moisture. They designed shock-resistant mounting systems. Mark II appeared in early 1941, then Mark III, then Mark IV, each version slightly superior, slightly more dependable, slightly easier for operators to utilize. And gradually, fighter crews began achieving results. The initial confirmed destruction using AI radar occurred on the night of July 23, 1940. Flying Officer Ashfield and his operator, Sergeant Leyland, in a Blenheim equipped with Mark IV, intercepted a Dornier 17 over Sussex. Their radar detected the bomber at 2.5 miles. Leyland guided Ashfield through a series of turns. At 400 feet, the Dornier's silhouette became visible against lighter clouds. Ashfield opened fire. The Dornier went down, burning. One victory, one confirmation that the technology could succeed. The operational victories came gradually. 2 confirmed in August 1940, 5 in September, 7 in October. These weren't impressive statistics. During the same time frame, the Luftwaffe was flying thousands of nighttime missions. But the trajectory was encouraging. More significantly, the tactics were advancing. Crews learned that AI radar performed best when utilized in coordination with ground control. Ground radar would position the fighter within roughly 10 miles of a bomber's stream. The AI operator would then scan his display until a contact emerged. He'd guide his pilot through a pursuit, calling out bearings and distances. Contact, 2 miles, 11 o'clock high, turn port 15 degrees, steady. Range closing, 1.5 miles. Maintain current heading. The pilot would observe his instruments, relying entirely on his operator's directions. At 1 mile, he'd begin scanning visually. At 1/2 mile, if conditions were favorable, he might catch the bomber's exhaust glow. At 1/4 mile, positive visual identification, then weapons engagement. It required absolute confidence between pilot and operator. The pilot was essentially flying blind, following voice instructions from someone hunched over a green display in the rear compartment. If the operator miscalculated, they'd lose the target. If he directed the pilot into an excessively aggressive maneuver, they'd enter a spin. If he misjudged the closure rate, they'd collide with the bomber. Nevertheless, they mastered it. Squadron 25, stationed at Martlesham Heath, specialized in night operations. Squadron 29 at Digby. Squadron 85 at Debden. These formations developed the procedures that would eventually become standard. They trained together until pilot and operator could anticipate each other's responses. They experimented with different pursuit patterns. They learned to identify false returns caused by ground reflection or atmospheric conditions. They discovered that AI radar functioned more effectively at specific altitudes and angles. By spring 1941, specialized night fighter squadrons were recording consistent successes, not spectacular figures, but steady. 10 confirmed in March, 14 in April, 18 in May. Then came the significant advancement, the cavity magnetron. In 1940, physicists at Birmingham University invented a revolutionary method to generate microwave radiation. The cavity magnetron could produce high-power radio waves at wavelengths around 10 centimeters instead of 1.5 meters. This seemed like an engineering curiosity until radar designers comprehended the implications. Shorter wavelengths meant smaller antennas. Smaller antennas meant reduced drag. Moreover, shorter wavelengths provided considerably better resolution. A 10-centimeter radar could distinguish targets that a 1.5-meter system would display as a single blurred return. The cavity magnetron was transported to the United States under extreme secrecy in September 1940, part of the technological exchange that preceded America's war involvement. American manufacturing capability could produce magnetrons in quantities Britain couldn't achieve. By late 1941, cavity magnetron-based AI radar was entering service. Mark 7 AI, operating on 10-centimeter wavelength, represented a revolutionary advancement. Detection distance increased to 8 miles under favorable conditions. Minimum range decreased to 400 feet. Most crucially, the system could discriminate individual aircraft in a formation. An operator could observe 5 or 6 distinct returns where marked PALP would show only confused clutter. The antennas were compact enough to install inside the aircraft's nose, eliminating the external arrays that had created such drag penalties. De Havilland Mosquito, the rapid twin-engine fighter bomber, became the perfect platform. The Mosquito was constructed largely of wood, which didn't interfere with radar transmissions as metal structures could. It was swift, capable of 380 miles per hour, faster than most German bombers. It possessed sufficient range to patrol for hours, and its nose provided adequate space for Mark 7 AI installation without external protrusions. Mosquito squadrons began operations in mid-1942, and the destruction statistics transformed. In 1941, RAF night fighters achieved 42 confirmed eliminations across the entire year. In 1942, that figure jumped to 175. In 1943, it climbed to 230. The initial 4 months of 1944 alone recorded 110 confirmed eliminations. This improvement represented superior equipment, enhanced training, and refined tactics, but also indicated that the Luftwaffe was now conducting more operations over Britain, again following a relative pause in late 1941 and early 1942. Operation Steinbock, which Germans termed the Baby Blitz, operated from January through May 1944. Hitler, infuriated by RAF attacks on German urban areas, commanded renewed strikes on London. The Luftwaffe assembled roughly 500 bombers and commenced night operations. They flew directly into a slaughter. RAF night fighters, now equipped with advanced AI radar and piloted by veteran crews, decimated them. On the night of February 21st, 1944, German bombers executed 127 missions against London. RAF night fighters destroyed 25 of them, a casualty rate approaching 20%. No Air Force can endure such losses. The methods had progressed substantially. Ground stations now operated in tight coordination with airborne radar. A characteristic interception in 1944 proceeded like this. Ground radar identified an approaching formation and directed a Mosquito to within 10 miles. The Mosquito's AI radar acquired contacts. Multiple bombers dispersed across the formation. The radar technician selected a target and directed his pilot into position. At 2 miles, the aviator could frequently observe exhaust flames. At 1 mile, the bomber's outline was distinguishable. The Mosquito approached to 300 feet below the radar's minimum detection, but near enough for definite visual confirmation. 4 20-millimeter cannons fired. The bomber detonated or descended trailing fire. The Mosquito instantly turned toward the next contact, already apparent on the radar screen. During exceptional nights, individual crews eliminated 3 or 4 bombers in one mission. The mental effect on German crews proved catastrophic. They'd become accustomed to British night fighters being infrequent, inefficient annoyances. Abruptly, in late 1942 and 1943, bombers were exploding without forewarning. No searchlights, no alert, simply sudden, devastating cannon strikes from the darkness. German bomber personnel began declining missions. Morale disintegrated. Units documented aircraft missing for undetermined reasons that were almost definitely shot down by AI-equipped fighters but never observed. By May 1944, the Luftwaffe had essentially surrendered the nocturnal airspace over Britain. Operation Steinbock concluded with German bomber casualties surpassing 50% of deployed aircraft, when accounting for both combat losses and operational mishaps, caused by crews hurrying takeoffs and landings to reduce vulnerability time. The supposedly useless radar had accomplished what appeared unachievable in 1940. It had rendered nighttime as hazardous for bombers as daylight. The strategic ramifications extended far beyond the immediate elimination figures. In 1940 and early 1941, German bombers had functioned with virtual immunity after sunset, compelling Britain to cease war manufacturing in targeted cities whenever air raid warnings sounded. Laborers evacuated to shelters, production lines halted, harbor workers deserted cargo vessels. The economic damage was enormous, not merely from physical devastation, but from forfeited productivity. A single attack could suspend manufacturing in an entire industrial area for 8 to 12 hours. By 1943, that equation had inverted. Luftwaffe leadership understood that dispatching bombers over Britain meant accepting casualties they couldn't compensate. Germany was now engaged on multiple battlefronts. The Eastern Front devoured personnel and equipment at terrible rates. The Mediterranean theater required resources, and the Wehrmacht was organizing for the unavoidable Allied invasion of France. The Luftwaffe couldn't afford to squander veteran bomber crews on operations that delivered minimal effect and maximum fatalities. RAF night fighters, equipped with AI radar, had effectively eliminated Germany's capability to execute strategic bombardment of Britain. This liberated British industrial capacity entirely. Manufacturing plants operated night shifts without interruption. Harbors functioned 24 hours continuously. The infrastructure that would supply the D-Day invasion, the largest amphibious assault in history, was constructed and accumulated without German disruption. Consider that. Millions of tons of materials, thousands of vehicles, complete prefabricated ports gathered in southern England while the Luftwaffe observed powerlessly from across the Channel. They knew the invasion was imminent. They could witness the accumulation from reconnaissance missions, but they couldn't prevent it, couldn't even substantially hinder it, because their bombers couldn't survive British night fighters. The technology pioneered in AI radar established the foundation for contemporary fighter interception doctrine. Every Air Force worldwide now trains fighter aviators to employ radar as their principal sensor, with visual confirmation as verification rather than the primary detection approach. The concept of the two-person crew, pilot and weapon systems officer, originated with AI radar technicians and remains standard in sophisticated fighters. The ground-directed interception methods developed during the Battle of Britain transformed into modern aviation traffic management and military command structures. The cavity magnetron that enabled advanced AI radar subsequently facilitated dozens of additional technologies. The identical physics that allowed British fighters to identify bombers at 8 miles also enabled naval surface detection radar capable of spotting submarine periscopes, targeting radar for anti-aircraft artillery, and ultimately, after the conflict, the microwave appliance that exists in your kitchen. That device heating your food is a direct descendant of the technology that preserved Britain. There's a grimmer inheritance as well. The arms competition in radar and counter-radar technologies that commenced with AI radar has never ceased. Contemporary stealth aircraft are engineered specifically to evade radar identification. Electronic combat, jamming, deception, signal intelligence is now a vital element of every military confrontation. The perpetual contest between detection and concealment that began over Britain in 1940 persists in every disputed airspace globally. Syria, Ukraine, the South China Sea all showcase the same fundamental conflict. One party attempting to observe, the other attempting to stay invisible. But in 1944, standing in the command center at RAF Hunsdon, observing status boards displayed German bombers being destroyed more rapidly than they could be deployed. Air Chief Marshal Roderick Hill could witness the transformation distinctly. The same Luftwaffe that had incinerated Coventry, ravaged London, and claimed tens of thousands of civilian lives was now shattered as an attacking force. Not annihilated, they continue fighting for another year, but shattered as a danger to British cities and manufacturing. Those 600 confirmed eliminations represented more than numbers. Each represented a bomber crew that wouldn't attack again, a payload of explosives that wouldn't fall on civilian residences, a night when laborers could rest and manufacturing plants could operate. The supposedly useless AI radar that squadron leaders had wanted to discard in 1941 had become the weapon that secured the nocturnal battle. It hadn't been simple. It hadn't been swift. Crews had perished learning to operate equipment that malfunctioned constantly. Scientists had labored 18-hour days enhancing systems that seemed fundamentally defective. Radar technicians had completed hundreds of missions, concentrating their vision on flickering green screens while their aircraft bounced through anti-aircraft fire and turbulence. But they'd persevered. They'd transformed a 600-pound liability into a war-deciding capability. They demonstrated that determination and gradual refinement could surmount apparently insurmountable technical barriers. And they'd guaranteed that when sunrise arrived on May 9, 1945, and the European war finally concluded, Britain remained standing, battered, depleted, but unconquered. The night fighters had maintained the defense,